You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Welcome to another episode of the 40 Thrive Podcast. Now, before we begin, I invite you, if you haven't already, to join us over in our free, exclusive, private Facebook group. That's where all the conversation around the podcasts or other expert advice and just talk and support and connection with other women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. It all happens over there in the Facebook group. So if you haven't yet, hit the show notes here and I will link directly to it and join us. We'd love to have you. All right. Now today we are doing something different. I am throwing down a challenge. We're heading into November, the last 2 months of the year, and for many of us, it can be extremely stressful, lonely, overwhelming, and have lots and lots of negative feelings along with this whole joyful holiday season, right? So I was thinking the other day, the month of November has a really important word in it, and that is the word no. How many times have you found yourself saying yes to things that just don't serve you? Things that maybe stress you out, things that maybe break the bank, things that make you feel less than joyful, less than peaceful. There are things that really just don't work in your life. Now, we all have obligations. I'm not saying that we don't. Of course, there are going to have to be things that you say yes to, even though you don't want to. But I'm talking about those things that maybe just for 30 days, we can say not now. We can say no. We can say, I'm going to put myself and my mental health and my well-being and just my whole inner peace first. And so I invite you to join me for 30 days of NO-vember. That's right. We're going to find an area in our lives, just one even, where you can say no for 30 days and really just put yourself first. We're headed into this season that is going to deplete us in so many ways. If we can just flex that no muscle for 30 days, I think it is going to make all the difference. So on today's episode, I talk with Christine Sarno. Christine is an award-winning sales and advertising powerhouse. She's got 20 plus years of leadership experience in media, promotions, tech. Go to the show notes and read her entire very impressive bio. But for me, the most important thing is she's my bestie, and she has a way of creating boundaries for herself that I've always admired, but more so as she has worked through her 40s. And so I brought Christine on because I think that we can talk about some of the ways that women feel depleted and spread too thin, but also have some real tangible advice and tips to move forward in a way where saying no gets a little bit easier. So enough chatter from me. Let's just get right into it. My conversation with Christine Sarno. A lot of people know you for your business advice and for your down-to-earth hilarity and your dance moves and all that good stuff, and for being this business coach for women and helping them ask for what they want and get what they deserve and all of that good stuff. But what they don't know is you're my person.
That's right.
You've been, since 1996, you've been one of the most important people in my life. So much so that, I don't know if you remember, but even my first baby, you changed his diaper before I did.
Sorry, I'm an overachiever. I got to take bestie to the next level, right?
So you and I have talked about this, but I'm just announcing that I am laying down a challenge for November. The month November already has the word no in it. And so we're going to talk today about the power of no and where we can actually start saying it in our lives where we haven't been so much. So first of all, let's talk about this. Women over 40, how are we spreading ourselves too thin?
How are we spreading ourselves too thin? I think, women in general, I personally believe it's a function of our upbringing and kind of how we're taught to not command our space, even as little girls. We kind of defer to the guys. I think just from my perspective, we're just innately people pleasers. And that also I also think that's a biological thing. We're nurturers, we're mothers, we want to take care of people. And so this whole people pleasing behavior, I think, is just something across the board that we all have to our own detriment. It's very difficult for us to say no. We want to make people happy. And we feel a sense of accomplishment, right? Like we did something good or we did something right because we made somebody else happy or we fulfilled somebody else's needs. And I think we often do that because we attach that to our worth.
Do you think that's a biological thing? Like you kind of touched upon that a little bit. Or do you think that's something that's programmed in us?
Biological, you know what is that, nature versus nurture? I think it's a function of both. I really do. I mean, think about it. Many of us have grown up watching a parent dynamic where, at least our generation, where it was, the man who went out and worked, right? And then it was the mom or the partner that stayed at home and took care of the kids and kind of supported the man and made sure that, the food was on the table and, the house was clean and that sort of thing.
His scotch was like ready to go when he got home with his slippers.
Right. So foreign to me, that picture. Because I can't relate to that in terms of how I live my life.
Right.
But that was my mom. And that was my mom with my dad. That was my mom after my parents got divorced when she started dating and found a new partner. It was just, let's put the man on a pedestal. Let's make him feel like a king. It doesn't matter if I've got my own work, my kids to take care of. It's okay if I don't have time for myself. I need to make sure my man is happy. And look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying as women, we shouldn't incorporate that into our relationship at a certain level, because I think that's, again, I'm not going to speak for everybody. This is a broad generalization, but I think, that's men like to feel as if they are important in that way. But I think sometimes we get to this place where we're over-serving. And we're over-serving so much so that we feel depleted. Like we don't even have time to stop and take a moment and reflect and go, man, I didn't get enough sleep. I didn't even get any like self-care time. Maybe I didn't get to that work project or that book or whatever it is, or that damn cup of coffee that's still sitting cold on the counter. And so when we do take a moment to think back, it's like we're so in this kind of mode of just trying to take care of everybody else all of the time. Yes. And we wonder, why do we feel depleted? I mean, I really think that's, there's a lot to do with that. And it's so frustrating for me personally, because here's the thing. I'm not trying to sound like, some tough, uncaring kind of tiger mom type of person. But I think at a certain point in our lives as women, we do have to recognize that we may have reached a tipping point. And I'm having a hard time, for me personally, kind of catering to, and I know this is going to sound kind of harsh, but catering to women who are almost kind of standing in their space from a place of, I'm a victim. This is happening to me. I'm letting this happen to me.
Right.
At a certain point, we have to kind of say, okay, I don't like feeling this way. And it's time to make some choices about what's a priority and what's not a priority.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I don't think you have to be a parent, a mom, to be that person who's constantly doing for others, who's constantly trying to fill the need of others, trying to please everybody. I remember, and you were at both of the 40 Thrive live events where Diann Wingert spoke, and we both know Diann,
yes.
and I will link to Diann's episodes in the show notes. But Diann talks about that menopausal brain or that perimenopausal brain where we're like, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? And then one day we're like, get your own effing dinner, And
right.
So I think you're right on target, not only with your personal development, but with your biology. Like our biology is literally saying like, yeah, I don't feel like going to Pinterest and finding a healthful, beautiful, like locally sourced dinner tonight. Get it yourself.
I know, right? If you want locally sourced, go outside and source it locally. You're welcome.
Go to the local Ralph's.
Right.
I think you're right on track when it comes to that. So this is definitely not just about parenting. This is about how we show up in our relationships. This is how we show up in our friendships. This is how we show up at work. And so one of the things, I have always appreciated about you, I'm not saying you're 100% at this, but you're pretty good at creating boundaries. Aww. You're pretty good at going, yeah, that's not going to work for me. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but that's not my problem. Did you always have that? Is it as you're getting older? Like, where did you come up with this wild concept of boundaries?
Well, first of all, thank you for the credit. You're too generous. I think I've just reached that place now, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
For me, given the fact that we've been in each other's lives for a very long time, so I know that you also understand this about me, but, my upbringing with the kind of parenting dynamic where my father was significantly older than my mom. He's American. And, my mom was born and raised in Taiwan, came to this country in her early 20s, barely speaking English. She was very self-conscious, kind of the subservient role. Mm-hmm. And so that was what I had to model the way a woman would behave in relationships, at least in a marriage. Let's use that as a for example. And plus my mom didn't work then, right? So I didn't have a career-focused mom that might have been able to kind of teach me other skills about maybe how to set boundaries, because you are a working mom, and then what it's like to do that at work. So I had to kind of figure that out on my own. And I think for me personally, it's because my parents had such a volatile relationship. My father dealt with alcoholism. There was challenges in terms of verbal and some physical abuse in the home towards my mom that, I had no choice but to learn how to be my mother's advocate and help kind of be her mouthpiece in terms of her interactions with people in general. We would be in the grocery store and maybe a grocery clerk would try to explain something to my mom on a cashier receipt or something, and my mom didn't understand, and I had to kind of translate, what's going on here. So I think for me it was a little bit of I guess learned, because it was more along the lines of this is about how to interact with others on a normal day-to-day basis, a little bit of survival skills had to kind of kick in. Right. And obviously it was, I think, motivated by, how do I protect my mom? How do I protect this feeling of needing to protect?
Right. And it sounds like you're saying also that you sort of had to create boundaries for your mom.
Yes.
That she wasn't necessarily in a place of confidence to do that for herself. So here you are, her young daughter, learning how to create boundaries for her.
Yes.
I've seen that in you. And so when we move into November now, and we're talking about saying no to things that don't serve us, what's something that you can do? Because obviously we're not perfect. We're all a work in progress. What is something that you could say no to during this month?
I think for me personally, the ability to say no to feeling that I need to be obligated when I have, because the amount of free time I have is so limited. And there's just a small amount of time that I have during the course of the week just for self-care, and that could be as simple as just taking an hour to myself and having a cup of coffee or tea and reading a book. And what I find that, and I'm very fortunate and very blessed to have this in my life, is I have a very full life. I have, a beautiful social circle. I call them, in general, my friends are my family, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, I have my family, and then, work colleagues and my kids and all of that stuff. But I think this particular month for me is to say it's okay to say no to all the social obligations. It's okay to kind of take a pass on social invitations. And not that these people aren't important to me, but if it's cutting into some time where I can kind of recalibrate or regroup, then I need to be aware of that and say, maybe not this month. Maybe give me this month to just whatever free time I have to use that to just kind of recharge my batteries a little bit. Because, I do feel sometimes that when you're juggling a lot of balls in the air, and that I'm a working single mom, I've got a brand new relationship that I'm, investing some time in, from a career standpoint. It can be stressful, very time consuming. I've got 2 different kids that go to 2 different high schools. It's a lot sometimes to juggle. And I do, because I care so much, feel guilty when people are extending invitations, especially those last minute ones where it's like, what are you doing? Hey, what are you up? The what are you up to today always gets me stressed out, because it's kind of like, all right, I know you're looking for something to do and you want to hang out with me, but I might just not have the bandwidth for it, So
it's a lot.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a great tip as we move into Thanksgiving is this month, and a lot of 40 Thrivers will be around family, maybe family that some of them may fill up their cup, some of them may not, And so I think really assessing the month ahead at like what is going to be required of you or asked of you, and being able to sort of make choices before they're emotionally charged.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like if someone's reaching out to you 2 days before Thanksgiving and that now you have to stop at 3 places, and that's going to really stress you out. Like we don't always have to say yes to everything.
We don't always have to say yes to everything. And I think we are 1,000,000% allowed to be honest with why we're not saying yes. I'm not saying that we need to necessarily socialize as a family and friends.
I would come, but I don't like you.
Right.
That doesn't work as well.
No, right. I mean, obviously it's in our best interest and everyone's best interest to use some finesse to maintain or protect your space. I'm trying to remember. I think I read this about a week or so ago. It was a tweet from Susie Moore. Are you familiar with her? I think she's a coach. I read this online and I thought it was so interesting, the difference. We don't necessarily have to say this to others, but maybe if we think this as women, it might allow us to empower ourselves a little bit more. But what she was saying is like, flip the switch from responding to demands or requests or invitations, all of it, from, I'm sorry, I don't have time for this, to this is not a priority right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And we don't necessarily have to say that to a family member, right, that wants to spend some time with us. I certainly wouldn't want to say to my sister, you're not a priority to me right now. But if I'm in a place where there's a lot going on, my mom uses this analogy that sometimes in life, especially as women, we're kind of functioning with the water level. Like the water is rising, the water level is kind of hitting the top of our upper lip. And we can still breathe, right? Because our nose is above level. That's kind of a dangerous place, because it takes one more thing to kind of tip the scale where that water now is above your nose, right? Maybe it's okay for us to look at requests that are being made of us and say, that's going to actually take that water level past where I can feel like I can breathe. And it's all right for me to take a pass on this right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. And the other thing too is on the flip side of that, when we say, I don't have time for, and there are things that we try to pretend that are priorities, it's like total BS. So like people who are like, I don't have time to work out. Listen, there are probably 3 people on the earth that probably don't have time to work out. I don't know. They have stuff going on. But for most of us, there is some sort of time, even if it's a 10-minute HIIT workout, so you're absolutely right that it's not, I don't have time, but it's more, this isn't a priority. And I think it's not only healthy to think like that, it actually shows us, I think we can lie to ourselves a little bit, like, oh, I don't have time, but in fact, it's not a priority. And so once you're honest with yourself and you say, hey, you know what? This thing is not a priority for me right now, then I think you're just much more aligned with who you are and what you want.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. And you know what I find that's interesting, especially at this point in our lives, that women are starting to become aware of this and actually kind of exercise this power, so to speak, is that friends and family and business colleagues that are used to always getting a yes. I say pay attention if you start sharing this type of feedback, giving this type of response in a loving, way. I'm not saying we need to go, F you, I don't have time for you. Right? Because then,
Even
of course,
when we want to.
even if we want to, because of course that's going to elicit, maybe the kind of response that I'm about to describe here. But I truly believe that people that are so used to how accommodating we have been, they're going to push back and they're going to may take offense to it, and they may say something about it or feel hurt or whatever it may be. But pay attention, because, I think in those relationship dynamics, that's a really great indication that it's time to start maybe shifting that relationship dynamic in this direction where these people understand that you are starting to create healthy boundaries for yourself, right? In the hopes that that can kind of continue to evolve into healthy relationship.
Right.
So
it might be uncomfortable for them, but
yeah.
that's not your job to make everyone comfortable.
Truth with a capital T. Let's
give my listeners some areas of their life, like in case you're listening right now and you're like, oh, okay, socially, that's not really a struggle for me. What are some of the other areas that we could be looking at in our lives to say no this November? I know sometimes to mass amounts of sugar that start with the holidays, and even alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
Paying attention to opening up that bottle of wine. Maybe that's something you want to say no to. What are some other thoughts that you have, Christine?
How about not feeling the pressure to have to, the holidays are around the corner, and a lot of people start shopping early. And I think there's like this, again, this kind of like this pressure to start kind of spending to make other people happy.
Yes.
I got to make sure I've got, the right gifts for my kids, or, what should I get for my boss, or that sort of thing. I started implementing something like this a couple of years ago with a lot of my close friends. And it was like, guys, let's just put the wallets away and let's just carve out quality time with each other. And it doesn't have to necessarily be around the holidays when it's so heightened, but let's just make a plan for us to have special time together. And let's take that pressure off the table and create memories.
Right. If you are buying gifts, like I love to buy experiences, where you can go and do something fun and different, adventurous, even if it's a hike and it costs nothing and you've done a little coupon. We're so worried, you're right, about like, how much did they spend? Now I have to match it, right, including tax. Right. It's just, instead of like going and giving somebody something that just feels good.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that's generally how I prefer to gift anyway. Time is so precious. We know this now. I think at this age and stage too, we realize so many of us have limited free time that when we want to spend free time with somebody, it's so much more meaningful, right? I want to make that time count. And I mean, how about you and I? Like, for the amount of times that we get to actually be together in person over the course of our friendship, just with work, with family, with a whole host of things. It's like, I don't want to. Don't give me a birthday or a Christmas gift.
Your birthday's coming up.
Right. Don't give me any gifts, like just time with you when we can make it happen. Right. That to me is everything, This gives us all kinds of wonderful memories that we can laugh about.
Right. I mean, life changes. Do you remember in our 20s, we'd be like, hey, let's go run some errands. And it'd be 3 days later and we're still hanging out.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I miss those days.
It would just get away from us. And now it's like, let's look 3 months in advance and see how's that random Tuesday.
Exactly.
And then, there's always a sick kid or a fire. And, we're supposed to be in person today and there are fires in LA. So it's like there's always something.
Right.
Getting in the way.
Right.
And so you just kind of have to make it happen when you can anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, I definitely challenge the 40 Thrive listeners to look at even just one thing in your life in November that you're going to say no to. You don't have to be mean. You can say it with respect and love, but it's just all about setting boundaries and living in a way that feels good, that you're not just a victim, as you were saying, of the circumstances around you, but that you feel like you're making choices that are right for you.
Right for you, and support the things that you want out of life and how you want to spend your time, right? We often forget we've got our hands on the steering wheel. This is our car to drive. It's our life.
And if you can say no for 30 days imagine what you can do next month. It's like, let's flex that muscle. Let's give it a little timetable.
That's right.
Because it's not as overwhelming.
Right.
You know?
And I am going to take on this challenge, not only because it's a fabulous idea and I love how you're renaming, kind of this NO-vember theme and concept, but because this is my birthday month, this is going to be a gift to myself too. So
there you go.
Right. So you just gave me my birthday gift, girl. Done.
See that? Happy early birthday. Hey, so before we go, I have to ask you, because I ask all my guests, what does it mean to you to 40 thrive?
I feel like it's such an empowering transitional time in a woman's life that I think it's okay for us to not have any hard outcomes about the future. And it's okay for us to go with the flow and take our life as it comes now, because it's such a time of discovery and self-awareness for so many women that it's okay not to have all the answers, right? It's to be a lot more forgiving of ourselves and to be open to what the future still holds. I think we're starting to realize there's so much more that we are capable of, that the possibilities are endless. And to be in your 40s and to start to have that realization, I think is amazing, because that's just going to continue on, for the rest of our lives. It's a beautiful place to be.
I agree. Beautiful. But you perfectly said. Christine, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I love you.
I love you. And you're the perfect person to have on. This to me is a celebration of boundaries the whole month. And like I said, if we can do it for 30 days, imagine how we can change our lives.
That's right.
Thank you so much for listening. Now head on over to the private Facebook group or Instagram and jump into the NO-vember challenge. I want to hear it. What are you going to say no to in November? And if you have a friend who could use this message, please consider sharing it. The more women we can get to listen to this podcast, the more women we can get to thrive. And I just want to share this message with as many women as possible. So please keep it going and share with a friend. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.